my name is Lois Konishiki. I'm with the Republican Liberty Caucus, and I have with me today Ben Gross, who is the legal director of the 10th Amendment Center. And we're here today to talk about our civil liberties, how they've come under threat, and our Constitution, and what we can do about these threats right here in Pennsylvania. So Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lois.
Really appreciate it. And you're with the 10th Amendment Center, and some of the viewers might not be familiar with the 10th Amendment Center, and you have led the charge in many ways in this effort to preserve our civil liberties. We're going to be talking about some specific legislation in Pennsylvania, a bill in the Senate 999, the Liberty Preservation Act. But in order for people to understand why that bill is important, I want you to give them some background. So why don't you tell them about what the mission is of the 10th Amendment Center and what you've been doing for the past few years.
I will do that. Thanks for having me, first of all. The 10th Amendment Center was founded in 2006 by Michael Boldin, who's the executive director. He's still the executive director today. The mission of the 10th Amendment Center is a public policy group. It's nonpartisan. We annoy and also please folks on both the left and the right, but we're neither. The 10th Amendment Center is a constitutionalist group. We believe in the Madisonian and Jeffersonian balance of powers, that the state's powers are expansive and the federal government's powers are limited. What does that mean? Or what do we do exactly? The tool in our toolbox, the 10th Amendment, if you recall from your civics class, is that all the powers that aren't given to the federal government are reserved to the states or the people respectively. And what does that mean? That means that if it's in the Constitution, such as the right to have to set up a post office or to fund a navy, those are clearly federal constitutional powers.
Right.
If it's not listed, in the view of the founders, it's not just my opinion.
Right.
This is the view of folks like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, that the states had all the other powers, the police powers, the powers to have libraries like we have here. And the tool in our toolbox, more specifically, is nullification. Nullification is the idea that came from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in the late 1700s, that if the federal government does something it's not supposed to do, that the states are duty-bound, in James Madison's words, to interpose, in other words, to stop the federal act. The idea was originally articulated in 1798. The president, I'll give you a little history lesson here. So part of understanding what we are today is we have to explain the history. Mm-hmm. In 1798, the president of the United States was John Adams. Mm-hmm. And John Adams was in the Federalist Party. And like any politician today in either party, Democrat, Republican, he didn't like critics. Mm-hmm. He didn't like criticism. He didn't like the press complaining about what he did. Mm-hmm. So he, with Congress's support, put in a law, a law known as the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798. And the Alien Sedition Act of 1978 essentially said you couldn't say bad things about the government, and said, by the way, if you're not a natural-born citizen, if you say bad things about the government, we could send you back to your country of origin. This mortified his political opponents. It was used at the time to put folks in jail, including a congressman, including journalists. James Madison, Thomas Jefferson got together and they said, we need to respond somehow. James Madison wrote what is known as the Kentucky Resolution. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Kentucky Resolution, James Madison wrote the Virginia Resolution, and the point of both of these resolutions was that, listen, federal government, it's the state that is the final authority on the discretion of the powers granted to the federal government. To give the federal government discretion is to let them be the arbiter of the limits of their own power. As you may recall from reading the Constitution, if you have or if you haven't, go look. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives a Supreme Court the right to rule on the constitutionality of the acts of the federal government, although that is arguably implied, or on the acts of the states. Matter of fact, James Madison, when he was arguing for passage of the Constitution, he said, you know, the Constitution, maybe that should have a federal veto of state law. And that was just, everybody thought that was a crazy idea. And so that never actually worked its way into the Constitution. Of course, we have one now, and we've had one for, especially the last 70, 80 years. But anyway, so Thomas Jefferson used the term nullification, that if the federal government does something that's beyond its scope, that's ultra vires, beyond the scope of its enumerated acts, that the states should nullify it.
Mm-hmm. And we have many instances of these types of acts throughout history, which I'm sure you'll touch on. But this is basically a states' rights issue, and that the federal government was supposed to be limited in power, and every other function of civil society or if a government were to take a role, should happen at the state level. And so in the fairly recent past, there's been more awareness, I think, in the general public that the federal government seems to have gotten bigger and stronger and kind of overstepped its bounds in many ways with a few years ago, the corporate bailouts. People got all upset about that. And then with Obamacare, people thought the government was coming in and taking over healthcare and becoming too intervened in these different areas of our lives. And people started to, get more actively involved. And then came the National Defense Authorization Act. And I'm not sure when those sections that we're going to talk about were originally passed. What year was that? 2010?
2012.
Okay, 2012. So we have the National Defense Authorization Act, and that's what one of our bills addresses, is this area. And the National Defense Authorization Act is normally a routine reauthorization every year of the military budget, correct?
That's right.
And then all of a sudden one year they came in and they added new stuff to it.
They did
correct?
add new stuff, yes.
New stuff that wasn't good.
Yes.
As far as the Constitution is concerned.
Right.
And it was a couple sections. Do you want to explain what those sections did?
I will. So let's fast forward. So I gave you a history lesson of what happened quite a few 200 years ago. What's going on now? As Lois said, the federal government is doing a lot of things that the states deem improper. The federal war on drugs, there are a lot of states that say, hey, medicinal marijuana, even recreational marijuana is okay. And that's something that the 10th Amendment Center, we have model legislation, and we support the idea. We're not opining one way or the other as to whether marijuana is a good drug or a bad drug, but what we're saying is that
it's a state issue.
It's a state issue.
Right.
For instance, the federal government, long ago, when it used to have a better respect for the balance of sovereign powers given to the federal government and the state government, they couldn't just pass a law and ban beer and ban Jack Daniels. What'd they do? They passed an amendment, right? Because they didn't have the authority in the Constitution.
Right,
so
they had to amend the Constitution.
Right. So, and that, of course, that was also appealed. I'll toast to that. But then years later, the federal government started a war on drugs. And we'll get to the NDAA, but just to kind of really tie it in. In the war on drugs, the federal government bans narcotics. And whether you think narcotics are good or bad or should be left in the individual to decide, it's a state decision. It's a state police power, which is why 20 states have nullified the federal government's laws on narcotics, and they've legalized marijuana usage for medicinal purposes, and in 3 states, including Colorado, for recreational purposes. Mm-hmm. And again, that's the type of thing that we promote at the 10th Amendment Center.
You promote the state right.
The state rights.
Not necessarily that states should legalize it, but just
right.
that they should have the decision at that level.
Right. We don't all walk around with marijuana logos.
Right. We're pushing the decision making down to a more local level, empowering people instead of the federal government.
As is intended to be.
Exactly.
As is intended to be. So let's fast forward to 2012. As Lois said, the National Defense Authorization Act is what it sounds like. Every year, Congress comes up with a budget for the federal federal military, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and that sort of thing. It's a fairly lengthy bill. They talk about military bases. They talk about different initiatives within the defense budget and the Defense Department. Mm-hmm. In 2012, added to that were sections 1021 and 1022, which purport to allow the president to detain U.S. citizens without a warrant and without habeas corpus. I'll get into habeas corpus in a second, and hold them indefinitely until the war is over, the war on terror, whatever war. A lot of civil libertarians on both the left and the right, the ACLU, Certainly, people in the libertarian wing of the Republican Party or even the libertarians found this alarming because never before was the president given the power to detain American citizens without the right to trial. Habeas corpus, for those who are not that familiar with the details, is the concept, and it's written in the United States Constitution, that anyone accused of a crime, any citizen, any resident, alien even, of the United States is allowed access to a civil court to prove their claim, notice an opportunity to be heard. The only branch that is allowed to suspend habeas corpus is the United States Congress, and they could do a writ of suspension, which they haven't done. Instead, they backdoored the right of the President of the United States to detain. Now, if you read the language, it does mention, well, it's like the bad guys like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, but then it also references this kind of broader, and any other belligerents. So if the president deems somebody belligerent, it could be the President of the United States, Obama now, maybe he doesn't like Tea Party groups, and it could be...
that would never happen.
It would never happen. Or it could have been, it could be a conservative, what you might call a right-wing president, and he doesn't like left-wing groups. It's not...
But it's not just belligerents, isn't it also people who may be assisting in some way?
Yeah, right, aiding and abetting.
Aiding and abetting.
Right.
And whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Right.
But the bottom line is the NDAA, a lot of times we call it the NDAA, and we're not against the whole National Defense Authorization Act.
No,
I'm sure
of course not.
There's pork there, but that's not our discussion.
Right.
But these are the sections that take away civil liberties that Americans have. And the other thing is, too, is it authorizes the military to go and arrest Americans. It allows the military to come into Pennsylvania and arrest American citizens, Pennsylvanians, and stick them in like a Guantanamo-like jail forever, at least until the hostilities end, whatever those are.
And without necessarily anybody knowing.
Without anybody knowing either.
That's the thing. I want people to picture this in your mind, that a federal agent could break into you or your neighbor's house in the middle of the night without a warrant, without you knowing why, pick you up and whisk you away in a military car and throw you in some detention center without you ever getting a phone call, without you ever being in front of a judge, without you ever having the right to consult anyone, a friend, an attorney, anyone, without a jury trial, nothing, without even getting to know the charges against you. It's something like out of a spooky 1984 movie. But this is what these sections authorize. And the president has said he won't use it. But the point is that he's been given authorization written into law to violate our Constitution. Our Constitution was set up to protect us from a tyrannical government. And this is saying, well, we're going to reserve the right to just nullify, basically they're saying they're going to nullify our civil liberties when they deem that they may feel like doing so, based on some bureaucratic judgment. We don't know. I mean, we don't know how this could be applied in the future.
We don't, and that's what makes it scary. It makes it scary, again, it's not a partisan issue, it's a civil liberties issue. If you believe in the fundamental rights of a right to access to civil courts, not military courts, as an American citizen, even if you do something wrong or alleged to have done something wrong, you should find this offensive in every fiber of your body. And before we move on to what the 10th Amendment Center, what Lois and I are working on in Pennsylvania to try to denude the federal provision, you may have heard that in the 2013 authorization there was an amendment to the NDAA. And in that amendment, there's a provision that purports to address the concerns of civil libertarians. As a matter of fact, Pat Toomey, our state senator, U.S. Senator for Pennsylvania, U.S. Senator, I don't want to demote him today, argues that was sufficient in his mind to protect the habeas corpus rights. But the way it's specifically drafted, and again, whenever Lois or I tell you something, we're telling you stuff that we read directly, primary source. But don't believe us. Go read the stuff yourself, and we'll give you the citations. Again, we're talking about the NDAA 2012 and then sections 1021, 1022. Read them yourselves. But in the 2013 modification, the habeas corpus is limited, it is protected relative to American citizens and it says Article 3 hearings. In Article 3, hearings or courts refers to U.S. federal district courts, U.S. courts of appeal, and the United States Supreme Courts. It does not, Article 3 does not address military courts. Military courts, and again, you can check the Constitution yourself, are addressed in Article 1. So it's a sleight of hand that tries to appease the civil libertarians by saying, listen, if you go to, if you are being heard or detained and you're given redress through an Article 3 court, you're fine. You're going to be given habeas corpus, but you're not given habeas corpus if, as Lois said, you're deemed a Tea Party radical. Or a gun owner,
some sort of threat,
some kind of
to
threat,
our country,
and you're put not in a civil prison, but in a military prison. If you're put in a military prison and you're subject to the law of war, you're not going to be given Article 3 habeas corpus protection. So it was a odd compromise by either lawyers who didn't get it or got it only too much because they knew they didn't want to reduce the power of the military or the politicians controlling the military to come grab their political enemies. And that's what it says.
So are you saying that civilians could be thrown in a military court?
They can. Mm-hmm. They can. Under the NDAA 1021, 1022, and even as modified by the 2013
So in other words, they can still use these provisions in the law to get what they want if they want to take you and get rid of you because they think you're causing trouble in some way or they're not sure, but they've got to put you away somewhere. They can still use these sections.
They can, indeed. So what do we do about that? That's the question.
Right.
Lois was working very hard with Pennsylvania state senators and their staff, and there are a number of us involved that all helped concoct the language. It was a few weeks ago now. It was the end of June when the legislation was introduced. Right, the end of June. State Senator Mike Fulmer. Where does he represent? He's in
Lebanon County.
Lebanon County introduced Senate Bill. This is Pennsylvania Senate Bill 999, which is Pennsylvania's sovereign response to the problematic sections of the NDAA. And there are two types of what we call nullification bills related to the NDAA. There is the noncompliance variety. And that's what we have, which says that Pennsylvania public officials, and that includes the police, state officials, municipal officials, are not allowed or actually prohibited under law from cooperating with the federal officials who try to come in the state and detain people pursuant to the NDAA. There was another variety of statute. We have both model ordinances at the 10thamendmentcenter.com. Our website. We have all model ordinances for all various interest areas. There's another one that has more teeth, and it criminalizes the acts of the federal official that comes in and attempts to nab a citizen pursuant to 1021, 1022 in the NDAA. And but Pennsylvania went with the non-compliance version. There's a group that I have a lot of respect for. They're called PANDA. It stands for People Against the NDAA or something like that. That sounds like the acronym that would stand for. And PANDA, I have friends that volunteer and work for PANDA. PANDA, they prefer the one with the teeth. They like criminalizing the federal activity, the federal officials that would come in under 1021, 1022. And we thought Pennsylvanians were ready for noncompliance. If that passes, maybe in the future we can consider the further step in making the federal actor and activity also criminal. But right now we think the noncompliance is fair, and it's also constitutional too. Under even a Supreme Court that has not been favorable to the states over the last 70 years or so. The federal Supreme Court has said that that states are not agents of the federal government. They haven't said the opposite, which is really true, that the federal government is the agent of the states. But states do not have to actively comply with a federal regulatory or enforcement mechanism. So this is it's perfectly constitutional. Now, there would certainly be more of a controversy if it had the teeth that Panda wanted, but we think it's a great start to send the signal to Washington, D.C. that Harrisburg legislators are duty-bound, as James Madison said, to interpose between their population, our citizens of our state, and out-of-control federal government.
Great. Well, we're going to talk more about that Senate Bill 999. We call it the Liberty Preservation Act, and why we need this in Pennsylvania after we come back from this short break.
The American Legion. We're a powerful force for the nation. We're patriots through and through. We believe in our flag and all that it stands for. Our Constitution, our Pledge of Allegiance, our way of life are all fundamental to maintaining our freedom and the standing that we have as the greatest country on earth. We promote and defend these values every day in communities across the nation. Go to legion.org to find out more about the American Legion's commitment of service to America.
What you doing, Dad?
My favorite thing.
Really, Dad, what are you doing?
Paying bills. Every month a stack of them come, just as regular as the rain.
What's this one?
That's a special one, son. I pay it first.
How come?
It's money for my retirement account. I put some money aside each month just like I was paying a bill.
Wouldn't you rather buy something?
I don't want to work forever, and I don't want you to have to support me in my old age. In a way, I'm buying peace of mind. I'm on the installment plan.
Kenny, dama bëgg nga jàng. Gis nga jàng dafa baax. Ndax gis nga tey ku ñi nekk ci nguur gi ñëpp. Jàngal ma sa table de multiplication ma dégg.
3 fois 1, 3. 3 fois 2, 6.
3 fois 5, 15.
bu jëkk Mariama ndaxam mën nga ñoo wax ñaata xaalis ngeen liggéey ci weer wi.
Hello, I'm Lois Kanashiki. Back again. I'm with the Republican Liberty Caucus, and I'm here with Ben Gross today from Pittsburgh, who is the legal director for the 10th Amendment Center. And we're talking about some civil liberties issues that we have and what we can do to address them. We were just talking about a bill that's been introduced to the state Senate, Senate Bill 999. We call it the Liberty Preservation Act, sponsored by Senator Fulmer from Lebanon County. And this bill is a non-compliance bill with the National Defense Authorization Act, the sections we were talking about, specifically sections 1021 and 1022. Actually, you can read about this in pretty good detail on the 10th Amendment Center website, and there's a ton of information on the internet about these sections because they were so controversial. So there's a lot of information out there, even though that there's still a lot of people that do not know about it. But our bill specifically deals with those two sections that for the first time allows the federal government to come into Pennsylvania or basically anywhere else in the country and detain people without any of their constitutional rights. And there have been people that have said to me, well, we have to go after the terrorists, right? And we all want to nab the terrorists. We don't want dangerous people running around if they're guilty of something, but we have mechanisms already in our criminal justice system to deal with these people, don't we?
We do, and there's a great example we had in the spring. I'm a marathon runner. I ran the Boston Marathon 4 times. I ran it this year. I was about 4 blocks from the finish line when the bombs went off. I had already finished the race. I was not harmed, but I spent a lot of time, like a lot of Americans, thinking about it. The police apparently had no advance notice that 2 homegrown terrorists, as they were called, were planning or plotting a terrorist incident at the end of the Boston Marathon. Through quick police work, both the suspects were apprehended. Some say that there might have been too much of a police state involved, but won't get into that right now. That's not the 10th Amendment issue. But through regular police work, has determined who the bad guys were. We didn't have and the one was obviously killed because he was they're shooting back at police, and that's what happens. The other one's detained. He's going to be given a civil trial. And if he's convicted after a proper hearing with all the constitutional safeguards, if he's convicted, he'll go to jail like any other murderer, and that's the way it should be. And I'm saying that from someone who should be emotionally attached to an event like the Boston Marathon, and was mortified that it would be marred by that kind of violence. But we have police, we have FBI. We don't need to have the United States, the states of the United States, militarized by the federal government. And that's actually something else I probably should have brought up before, talking about what's offensive. The big issue is the lack of habeas corpus, the lack of access to civil courts, the possibility of indefinite detention, kind of like the Guantanamo prisoners. But the other part is the concept of posse comitatus. In the 1870s, after the Union military had essentially been acting as a police for the South and parts of the Union, there are a lot of complaints about using the military for local police functions. And the Posse Comitatus Act was passed. It essentially says that military cannot be used domestically unless Congress specifically revokes the provisions of that act. Here again, this is a unacknowledged exception to posse comitatus because if a U.S. Navy SEAL unit landed in my neighborhood and said that I'm stirring up passions of civil libertarians and carted me away to Guantanamo, I'd say that was in violation of that act. So that's the other concern too.
Mm-hmm. So we have the Senate Bill 999, the Liberty Preservation Act now, and what it would do, it would make it illegal for Pennsylvania to assist the federal government in detaining someone under NDAA. So we would basically say, so if they came in asking for our assistance in apprehending and detaining someone, we would say we are no part of this. It doesn't end it, but it's a strong statement that we object to this a violation of our civil liberties. And we do have an opportunity every year when they reauthorize the NDAA to make changes in these provisions. But in the meantime, the states can step up and take some kind of a stand.
Right. They are. And this is actually this is directed to any state senators who happen to view this. And the question is, am I the first one? Is Pennsylvania the first? Am I doing something no one else is doing? There are a lot of politicians that are honorable and do the right thing, but there are also ones that, like, am I the first one out there? I don't want to be the first one doing something that seems to be dramatic or controversial. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is, 20 states have introduced legislation similar to Pennsylvania. The state of Virginia passed as law an act that is not too much different than Pennsylvania's, and it's law. It was signed by the governor last year. There are another 10 states where it's passed at least one house. Montana, it's passed both houses. In fact, Michigan, a state very similar to Pennsylvania in Rust Belt state, similar demographics, their Senate unanimously passed their version of the NDAA, which is very similar to our bill, and that was Republicans and Democrats working together saying, hey, federal government, we don't want the military coming in, snatching up Michiganders and sticking them in military prison indefinitely. So a message, if anybody asks, well, has this been done before? It's being done right now. Pennsylvania can certainly join the liberty movement. It's not the first one in line, but it'd be great if Pennsylvania got in line. And
if you go to the 10th Amendment Center website, you actually have a map where people can look at which states have passed legislation in one or both houses or introduced legislation, and you can track it. You have a tracking center there where they can follow
Yep.
all that.
On all of our issues, we have legislative tracking, and that could be Obamacare, it could be anti-drone, it could be marijuana, it could be gun law issues. We have tracking. So again, the model legislation is there. We can see who else is doing this.
Right. Now, right now, our bill is in the Intergovernmental Operations Committee. Again, we're talking about Senate Bill 999, the Liberty Preservation Act. Now, how this works in the state legislature is that the chairman of the committee, which in this case is Senator Hutchinson from northwestern Pennsylvania, he's a Republican, he's the chairman of the committee, and Senator Hutchinson has the ability to bring this bill up for a vote or not. If the bill doesn't come up for a vote or a hearing, the bill will just sit there and die. There is no mechanism. The only mechanism to force this bill is you to get on the phone and call your state senator, call them and tell them that this doesn't sound right to you, that the federal government should be able to do this. And you know what? You expect your elected officials to help you take a stand and preserve our civil liberties. Now, if you don't know who your state, now, if you're in Bethel Park, your state senator is probably Senator Smith. But if you don't know who your state senator is, if you're watching this from some other area, you just go on the Pennsylvania General Assembly website, and they have a screen there where you can search for your legislator. You just put in your address, and it'll bring him or her up, and so you know who to contact. But if you don't help us contact these state senators, if we can't get support from this for this bill, it's not going to go anywhere. So we really need your help in helping us preserve our civil liberties for our generation and future generations, because that's what we fought. We've fought all these wars for our liberties and our freedoms, and we value the Constitution and these liberties that we have really grown up taking for granted, Ben, haven't we?
That's right.
We take so much for granted, but it doesn't mean it at some point to be taken away.
Right. As a teenager in the 1980s, and Ronald Reagan was president, we heard a lot about how the communist bloc countries, whether it was the Soviet Union or East Germany, they spied on their citizens, and they detained their citizens and sent them to Siberia and shot them when they tried to leave, and their militarized surveillance societies. I grew up thinking that was bad, and it is bad. It's not an environment that anybody want to live in. And matter of fact, what did they do? The East Germans said no more. The Soviets, the Russians said no more. We don't want that. So I find it ironic that we're discussing these same issues that we thought we defeated in other countries, 30 years ago. So they are important issues. Again, these are nonpartisan issues. Lowest intertidal, it says Republican, but it's not a Republican issue. I know people in the ACLU that are very liberal, but they believe in their civil liberties. They don't believe in a militarized a government that could come in and capture U.S. citizens, Pennsylvanians, and stick them in prison without trial and without warrant.
Yes, it's very scary, and we don't want to wait until this can be abused before we do something about it. In fact, it could be being used right now. We wouldn't even know it. In fact, in our bill, it says that the Attorney General has to let us know if this goes on in Pennsylvania, and so it has to become public information. That's another part of the bill that I really like, is that it will, at least in theory, it will bring it to our attention if it's being done. So otherwise, this could be done in complete secrecy, and I certainly wouldn't want this to happen to someone that I knew. I'm guilty or not, we live in a country of laws, and we have a system for the innocent and the guilty to, innocent until proven guilty, hopefully. And then, you go through a fair process, and then a jury decides, or whatever the situation is. If it's treason, we have a system outlined in the Constitution to deal with treason. You're supposed to be hanged or what have you. But there's a process. It's already codified in the Constitution, and we don't need to be mucking up with our civil liberties. In fact, if you go on our website, rlcpa.org, there's a good write-up on there by one of our members, Mark Scaringi, who was very instrumental in getting this bill introduced as well, who outlines all the violations of our constitutional liberties right on the paper, and it's very well documented there. And we do have instances in our past where in times of war where our liberties have been trampled on.
Right.
Right here in our country.
We do. We do. As anybody who lived through it or anybody who was awake during their American history class, large central governments have not always been a friend to civil liberties, even in democratic republics like the United States. During World War II, Americans of Japanese ancestry, they were born in America. Some were not born in America, but any Japanese American, whether you're born here or not, you're rounded up and you're stuck in internment camps. And those people had jobs and they lived in communities and they weren't lawbreakers, but they were presumed that they were sympathizing with the enemy in a racist way too, because I'm of German descent. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Many generations of Pennsylvanians behind me. A lot of Germans. Just as easily, Germans could have been rounded up and stuck in an internment camp as well. So we have an example of the federal government doing this already, and the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, said that was okay. They ruled that the federal government during wartime has the right to do that. And I know that the question that Lois is going to ask me, or you're probably thinking right now, like, why don't we just wait for the federal courts to decide on this? Really, is it a state issue? Like, don't federal courts in the Supreme Court, they're these cool, calm, constitutional scholars, and they could make these decisions. Well, there is actually and I'll get to that concept in a minute, but there is actually a federal judge in New York State, Judge Forrest, who said, hey, this is unconstitutional. Someone brought it up. Someone brought the case up. She said, this is unconstitutional, and I'm going to stay, which means prevent the NDAA sections that we're talking about from being enforced. A court of appeals vacated her stay, saying, well, we're going to have a further hearing on this, but you as a federal judge, we're not going to let you say this is unconstitutional and stop this for the whole country. Will that get to the United States Supreme Court? It might. But keep in mind, again, you could look, when I tell you stuff, look it up yourself. From 1937 to 1995, Lois, how many times do you think, I'm going to ask you a question, trivia questions today, Quizzo, how many times do you think the United States Supreme Court invalidated an act of the federal government from 1937 to 1995? Take a guess.
Over like a 60-year period there, I wouldn't say not too often.
0. In the 60-year period, the federal government never once invalidated a federal law.
The Supreme Court.
The federal Supreme Court. Lots of state laws. Now, there have been 3 instances since then. Lopez was the first one in 1995, and that was the guns in the school zone case. And finally, the Supreme Court's like, okay, that's not the Commerce Clause, and we're finally going to do that. But keep in mind, when you think about the Supreme Court ruling on the extent of the powers that the Congress and the President would like to participate in, think about it in terms of analogy. I'm a baseball fan. I'm originally from the eastern side of the state, so I always had a soft spot for the Phillies. Of course, now you cannot not be a Pirates fan. Pirates are doing very well. But imagine if the Pirates and the Phillies played each other. And instead of having a neutral umpire, you get Chase Utley from the Phillies to be the umpire. Well, the Phillies would love that because he's probably going to call a better strike zone to be favorable to the Phillies and not so favorable to the Pirates. Well, remember, the Supreme Court is not a neutral branch; it's part of the federal branch, which is why, not surprisingly, it tends to favor anything the federal government does. They are, at the end of the day, and I studied constitutional law in law school quite a few years ago, but they are 9 politically appointed lawyers that wear black robes. They're not gods, and they are politically appointed lawyers, and they tend to favor their employer.
And we know how important it is when there's an appointment up that, who is going to make the appointment is always a big deal.
It is.
Because they want somebody in there that's going to interpret the Constitution from a certain perspective.
Right. And that perspective, whether that's left or right, that might not be a state perspective. And again, James Madison in the Virginia Report of 1800, when he summarized what happened in the whole alien and sedition controversy, he said, listen, he's like, the Supreme Court is supreme as to judging on the or ruling on the acts of Congress or the acts of the executive branch. But it's the states are the final court of judgment for whether the federal court has exceeded its bounds. And again, James Madison, I'm not going to do a whole history lesson on James Madison, but he's the father of the Constitution. He's the one who argued for its passage. He's the one who came up with the Virginia plan that was eventually modified to the current Constitution. This guy knew the Constitution inside and out. So again, you could have an opinion as to whether you think what we're talking about is a good idea or bad idea, but the historic facts are the historic facts.
Right. Well, thanks very much for all that good information, and it's a lot to take in, but it's an important subject, and we're going to come back and probably wrap up this Liberty Preservation Act and maybe talk about some other legislation just in a moment.
Hi, I'm Chevy Checker. A new twist in the law makes it easier than ever to save on your Medicare prescription drug plan costs. So what are you waiting for? Go to socialsecurity.gov and apply for extra help. It's easier than learning the twist.
What do we have here?
You take Medicare, don't you?
Sure.
And you probably have a lot of patients who are ready to go on Medicare, yes?
Yes.
You know, you could tell them that if they're 65, they can go to socialsecurity.gov and apply for Medicare online. It takes less time than sitting in a doctor's office. It's less than 10 minutes. It's quite easy.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
This is great. Every day should be like this.
It will be when I retire in a few years. I've been planning and saving.
Did you save for me? Well, this is unexpected.
Where'd you come from?
Out of the blue, just like an illness, an emergency, or
That's enough, Mr. Unexpected.
Savings Man.
There's still time to plan. Find out how at choose2save.org with a ballpark estimate worksheet.
I will. Thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you.
So visit choose2save.org today.
My Jamie, a precious baby girl. When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risk for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. No mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Hello, I'm Lois Kanashiki, back again with Ben Gross from the 10th Amendment Center here in Pennsylvania, legal director, and I thank you again for joining us today and helping us with all this great information. And I really appreciate everything the 10th Amendment Center is doing. And we were just going through our Senate Bill 999 in the state Senate. We call it our Liberty Preservation Act. And what our bill does, it makes it illegal for Pennsylvania to help the federal government enforce these unconstitutional sections of the National Defense Authorization Act. We call it NDAA. We actually have a page on Facebook. You can go on Facebook and like. It's just put in there, Stop NDAA in Pennsylvania. You can go on there and like it and help support our cause there. And what we'd like you to do, if you would please contact your state senator and ask him or her to put their support on this piece of legislation. It would really help us out. Otherwise, the bill will sit and die in Senator Hutchinson's committee. We need the support for this bill. Without your interest in preserving our civil liberties, we're not going to be able to get it through. So we really need your support on that. If you need more information on it, you can go to our website, the Republican Liberty Caucus of Pennsylvania, rlcpa.org, and there's information of the bill on there, and you can read about it there, and then contact your state senator. So this is one piece of legislation that we have that the 10th Amendment Center helped us in Pennsylvania, but I know you're working, there was one other topic I'm sorry I wanted to cover with you, was we talked earlier in the program about nullification. And sometimes people think, when they think about nullification, they think that the nullification concept was used to help enforce slavery. But that's not true, is it?
That's not true. Nullification, again, the Madisonian concept of nullification, was used multiple times in history. It's used a lot right now. There are 30 examples of laws passed around the country that are proper nullification type statutes. In the 1800s, slavery was the law of the land. And in the Constitution, slavery was perfectly legal until after the Civil War. It was made illegal by the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. But prior to that time, slavery was the law of the land. And like any provision of the Constitution, they're not self-executing. So even a power given to Congress, the power to regulate or enforce the Fugitive Slave Acts, they had to pass a Fugitive Slave Act, and there are a few of them. Most notoriously was one of it was 1850. So we had a federal law called the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. The abolitionists, mostly in the North, didn't like this at all because slavery had long been controversial. Again, you could go to the founding, the writing of the Constitution. There were founding fathers that were slave owners, and there were ones that thought this was an institution that we really had to stop. But let's go back to the 1850s. So the northern states didn't like the idea of runaway slaves coming to the north and then being forced to give them back. Sometimes forced to give them back on not even a proper hearing, kind of like we're talking about the states, like
back,
Pennsylvania, New Jersey, in Connecticut, and Wisconsin were required that if a fugitive slave escaped, they had to give that slave back to the owner. And in the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, there wasn't even a proper trial. It's almost like the NDAA situation where the southern slave owner would come up and say, hey, that's my slave, here's an affidavit, and I get to take him home. And this was anathema to northern states, who, again, a lot of them were abolitionists,
right.
But they also believed in the personal liberties, which our Constitution was founded. So they passed, including Pennsylvania, about 8 states, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, passed what's known as Personal Liberty Acts, which gave certain rights to fugitive slaves. Now, the southern states cried foul. They said, you, the North, you can't nullify federal law. And it was quite a controversy. And so when I hear from people some criticism, if they just heard something on a blog or in the Daily Kos or something like that, and they'll say, well, these are neo-Confederates, they just want pro-slavery. It's like the 100% or 180-degree opposite of what happened.
And it would have been very easy for them to say, we're just going to play it, we're not going to cause any waves, we're just going to send the slaves back and not. But they really believed in this on principle.
Right.
On principle, they passed a law and they said, we're going to draw the line somewhere.
We are.
That's what we need to do more of. We need to start drawing lines. Our federal government is getting completely out of control. I think the average person understands that now. We need to start drawing some lines.
Right.
And we need help from our federal legislatures. You and I can't do this alone. We need we have a full-time state legislature, one of the highest paid in the country. We need these men and women to start standing up for some things. Now, I know a lot of them are trying to do the right thing, but we need them to get out of their comfort zone sometimes and say, wait a minute, these federal laws, we have to draw the line on to what extent we're going to allow these things to go on. And when we drafted this bill, we thought it was a compromise, but we thought it was also a step in the right direction. And I think it's a great start to say we can't tell the federal government, in Pennsylvania can't reverse the law, but we can say we are not going to help enforce that. We are not going to help in any way. And if enough states did that, it would be greater ammunition to make the necessary changes in that federal law that we need.
Right. And just like Pennsylvania and other states did that in the 1850s in response to being forced to turn slaves back. And it's the same thing. The northern states, the abolitionists, were concerned about the personal liberty of the slaves, and they said no against the federal government, because the federal government was not supportive of the state view on this. And the federal government is not supportive of the personal liberties of Pennsylvanians and other Americans by passing the NDAA that we're opposing. So it's the same thing, and we're asking you to think about it, to contact, as Lois said a couple times, your state senator, explain this is a win-win. I can't imagine you're not going to lose a vote over this, and I'm not going to vote for it because who's not going to vote for somebody who favors civil liberties? I mean, this is an easy vote for any state senator, regardless of party, whether they're from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or Wilkes-Barre or Altoona or State College. It's an easy civil liberties win that you could go and brag about when you go run for re-election. Hey, I'm on the side of civil liberties, and I'm telling the federal government no, they can't grab our citizens and stick them in jail without a trial.
Absolutely, and if your senators don't hear from you, it's going to be very difficult for us to get this through. So we need your help. Please contact your state senator and tell them that you would like them to help out with this bill, co-sponsor the bill, and ask them for a response in writing so you know where they stand. So that's the Liberty Preservation Act, and if you have any other questions, you can go to our website or 10th Amendment Center website and check that out. I know the 10th Amendment Center has another project currently in Pennsylvania. This is not in the state Senate, in the House.
We do. The National 10th Amendment Center has we have chapters, active chapters, in about 25 states. When I say active chapters, we have an executive director. His name's Steve Palmer. He's in the eastern side of the state. I handle more of the western side or the legal issues that arise. And every state is free to prioritize issues that they find near and dear, whether it's a Obamacare issue or anti-drone legislation, that sort of thing. And certainly we encourage in Pennsylvania anything that the 10th Amendment Center supports. But you got to pick and choose some issues, and in Senate Bill 999 is one of our top issues. The other top issue is in the House. It's Darrell Metcalfe's House Bill 357, aptly named. This came out in January, and it's a proposal to nullify any new federal firearms laws that are enacted after December 31st, 2012. There's some states that went further than that. Actually, Kansas passed something that's just like House Bill 357 into law. Governor Sam Brownback signed that into law. These types of laws are pending in at least 25 states. They passed probably, I think, about 15 houses at this point, houses or senates in various states. We have 77 co-sponsors on this. Again, this is an easy one. Pennsylvania has always been a pro-Second Amendment state. And this is a way to say that the Second Amendment is not self-executing either. The states every once in a while have to push back and say no more. We have our own Constitution, which in Pennsylvania says that gun ownership shall not be questioned. Some people say that even goes further than the federal amendment, the Second Amendment, which applies to Congress and the federal government. But House Bill 357, it's popular among constituents. It doesn't affect any laws, any prior laws, but it affects gun ownership, ammunition ownership, the things that again civil libertarians are concerned about. So if you're making phone calls one day, don't just call your state senator, call your state representative up and say, hey, can you if your name's on the list, can you co-sponsor and support House Bill 357, and that'd be great.
Sometimes I have people say to me, well, why do I have to call my legislators? I mean, can't they just do the right thing? And, like I said before, I think we have taken so many of our great quality of life in our country. We have taken so much for granted, and that we have freedom, and we always will have freedom, and we're going to have this great way of life. And I don't know if we remember our history, that our forefathers told us in order to maintain this type of society, we needed people to participate, that it wasn't just enough to go and vote on Election Day, that you have to be eternally vigilant, Jefferson said, didn't he? Eternally vigilant. It means you have to pay attention all the time, and you do have to be contacting your legislators on certain things because they only hear from the special interests. They don't hear from people who necessarily care about the Constitution. They hear about people who want a special program or a carve out here and there. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But they don't hear from people that just care about the Constitution. And I'm not saying to call them and just say, oh, please uphold the Constitution. You have to be more specific. When we have a bill like this, one of these bills, House Bill 357 or Senate Bill 999, when you know there's a good piece of legislation in there that's going to do something good, we need action on that legislation. Because first of all, getting that bill in there, that's part of the process, and that's a process in itself. But once it's in there, most of these bills just die. Most of the bills never go anywhere, you know. And in order to get that bill, get a vote on that bill and get people on the record, we need somebody else to take action. In this case, it's Senator Hutchinson. After you call your state senator, now we know, I don't know, what committee is your House Bill 357 in?
I don't know that offhand.
Okay, I'm not sure either. We can look that up. Yep. But we know that Senator Hutchinson has the power to let this bill die or to bring it for a fair hearing, which wouldn't be a bad idea, and to bring it for a vote. And we want a vote, whether it's up or down. We want to see, and you know, if there are little things in the bill, the language that have to be tweaked, that's what the committee process is for, to make those little changes if it's needed. You know, we drafted the bill, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. So if they need to make a change here and there, let's have them in the open, discuss it, and see what we need to do to get it passed so we have something in Pennsylvania. But we need your help. We need your help, your eternal vigilance to help us preserve our liberties, preserve our Constitution, and let's do our part in Pennsylvania to preserve our quality of life for ourselves and our future generations. Don't you think?
I agree.
Yeah. If you didn't, you wouldn't be sitting there. So, did you have anything else about Bill 357 that you want everyone to know about?
I don't. I just encourage anybody who's not familiar with our work at the 10th Amendment Center, go to 10thamendmentcenter.com. We also have that's linked to a Pennsylvania chapter website, but the national website, and I work with the leadership team of the National 10th Amendment Center on a daily basis. We do good nonpartisan work. We're all fed up with Congress. We're all fed up with D.C. We think the solution comes to the states, and the solution that we're looking for is always based in liberty and freedom. And that's what we stand for. But we have a lot of interesting material, and you can find a pet issue that you can support. And if you need, if you share this with people in other states, we have model legislation on a host of issues. It's free. Our website's free. I'm not asking for money at all because we work on a shoestring budget. This is all. It's about liberty. It's not. I don't know how many times we get these email fundraisers, and it's like, take a survey. Are you against this or that? Are you favor that? And you're like, oh yeah, they want to hear my voice. And then you click on it, and like, oh, by the way, can you donate $200? That's not what the 10th Amendment Center is about. The 10th Amendment Center, it's nearly all volunteer. We just care about liberty.
Well, I thank you so much for all your help with our bills, and thank you for coming here today and taking time out of your work day. And I thank you for watching. And remember, Senate Bill 999, the Liberty Preservation Act, and House Bill 357. And I'm Lois Konishiki with the Republican Liberty Caucus, and I thank you very much for watching today.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
This is great. Every day should be like this.
It will be when I retire in a few years. I've been planning and saving.
Did you save for me?
Well, this is unexpected.
Where'd you come from?
Out of the blue, just like an illness, an emergency, or a...
That's enough, Mr. Unexpected.
Savings Man.
There's still time to plan. Find out how at choositosave.org with a ballpark estimate worksheet.
I will. Thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you.
So visit choositosave.org today.
The American Legion. We're a powerful force for the nation. We work relentlessly within our 4 pillars of service, and we succeed. Go to legion.org to find out more about the American Legion's commitment of service to America.
So you've got a song about where to call for government information?
Check this out. We got the benefits and services that'll make you smile to get the answers you need. Put us on speed dial.
That is gold, Your Honor.
1-800-FIT-INFO.